Welcome all, welcome to Conversations with Joe Barton, a cannabis activist and Freedom First Party. And there we are on camera, and it's welcome, Joe, welcome very much to the program. And in the audience, our guest Joe Barton, an activist of the highest order, doing a lot of good work, as he will be able to convey to us, with particular, among other things, a cannabis advocate on the idea of the 2.5 million people that are needlessly locked up in our prisons and some implications of that and other matters. And Joe, welcome so much to Conversation.
Well, it's good to be here, Harold. And yeah, that's basically what I've been pushing for 40 years. Mm-hmm. We got so many people in prison in this country for marijuana when our government knew from the very start that marijuana did no harm, and that it was a medicine long before they ever made it illegal. It was in so many pharmacies and in tincture form and in many forms, cough medicines, and our government knew that it was harmless, but because of the big corporations wanting to keep the farmers down and to stop hemp from being grown, because it would have been $1 billion industry, and it would have, instead of the bankers and all the big capitalists making money, our farmers would have been making money. So that was the real reason why they made it illegal. It wasn't so much just because people were getting high, and then they used it for racist things because of the Mexicans and blacks were smoking, so the jazz people. So they used that as an excuse to
continue their racist policies.
Right, to continue their racist policies, right. And right now our prisons are full of so many people that shouldn't be in jail, since our government knows it does no harm. In 5,000 years of recorded history, there's never been a death from marijuana or an overdose from marijuana ever. So yet they keep it in Schedule 1, which is the same schedule as heroin or cocaine. And they've taken children away from parents who smoke, destroyed families by putting either mothers in jail or fathers in jail.
Yeah.
You know, it's time to stop it. You know, the American people need to wake up and start speaking up on this, you know.
Yeah, it sure is, and it looks like that's maybe coming to be after that war on drugs that Mr. Reagan and others led back when. And how was it the nation was able to get away with doing that? And what was the mindset of the people that would have run against all the evidence of it going back 5,000 years of really curative properties and so forth? Well, what was the mindset that they would have had to get that war on drugs so successfully ensconced within the system?
Well, it was a combination of what's his name, who had the newspaper industry.
I don't know.
I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah, maybe it'll come. Yeah.
But he controlled the paper industry and supplied all the newspapers. And he didn't want cannabis paper being made. And then you had all the pharmaceutical companies. They now had come out with all this new synthetic drugs.
Yeah.
And marijuana could be grown by people at home, and the tinctures could be made by anyone. And they knew back in 1974, our government did research on marijuana for brain cancer. And in their research, they found out that marijuana cured brain cancer. It attacked the cancer cells, but it didn't attack the normal cells. But they did a whole scare campaign by saying marijuana attacks brain cells. They didn't tell people that it attacked the cancer brain cells and not the normal cells. And, you know, every step of the way, they have lied about marijuana to the American people, and it's all been a scare campaign, and it's all been about money, about the big corporations.
That's getting down to
it.
the basic thing. It's about money. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And it's had don't you get some heart or something that a lot of the work you've been doing, and I know you want to let all the prisoners out of prison that were joined or something.
I want to see all marijuana prisoners
and I think
free.
what do they call stop and frisk stuff that goes on in Harlem and that kind of stuff ought to be stopped forthwith, and so forth and all of that. And that's a good cause to be involved in.
Yeah. Well, look how much suffering these bogus laws have caused. How many lives they've destroyed. How many young kids. If a young kid gets arrested for a marijuana charge, there goes he can't get a loan to go to college. So they've pretty much stopped his forward growth as far as education.
Right.
You know. Yet a heroin addict, because he's an addict, they will give as a rehabilitation thing. They'll let him go to college. And it's such a discrimination against marijuana. It's beyond belief.
Really, they'll be more harsh with marijuana than they would be with heroin in some instances. In there. What is it? Would that be something that has to do with again? We try to get a basic thing. Why are things so confused? Or how is the human condition and the institutions of it set up, and on what priority? And you came back to it's money. And I'm wondering if it isn't, in a very real sense, indicative of understanding all the institutions that form the human condition, or the means of having the human condition and institutional structures, that the most important thing in doing that is money.
Right, and
money is the major motivator for all human behavior, and it perhaps shouldn't be, or how do we address that basic cause of so much of the dysfunction that is manifest everywhere in the world now?
Right. Well, it's what the kids on Wall Street were saying. You got the 1%ers, the real money people who control the economies of the world, and they make profit. The whole drug war, not just marijuana, but the whole drug war is about profit. They profit off every prisoner. Now they have corporate prisons, and our government and the taxpayer pay money to keep all these people locked up, and it's just about making money, and unfortunately none of our politicians are even close to enlightened. They're all paid off, bought off, and they've sold out the American people.
Is that characteristic of the establishment? That's a term that's used in general, that they're bought off, sold off the system. Let's say the legal, you're very involved with the legal system. We want to get to your argumentation and being able to deal with and understand effectively, in the interest of the mass of the people, the law, which is like some sort of a kabuki, Fremonty game that goes on in the court system. But is it all based upon the fact that the institutions are out of sync with what is, perhaps, is it ever going to be set up in a way that can be truly liberating of the whole human spirit of everybody in a liberating way, or will we endlessly have to put up with reified, established institutions that are not able to bring elemental justice on the mass to the people, and including increasingly the ecology, which seems to be a thing that's part of the thinking in a systematic way. I don't know if you can follow all that. Well, the economic policy assumptions are out of sync with what the times require.
Oh, for sure.
And that's a basic grounding thing for all the dysfunction in a very real sense, right?
And before we were talking, before we went on the air, we were talking about the banking thing. We found out through a forensic examiner who testified before Congress that for $3 trillion, the politicians could have paid off every mortgage in this country, and every person would own their own home. But instead of giving $3 trillion to every politician, to every person to pay off their mortgages, the politicians who were financed by the banks for their campaigns gave first $16 trillion to bail out the banks, and then the next year gave another $16 trillion. So for $32 trillion that the banks swindled the American people out of, instead of paying $3 trillion so that every person would own their own home, and then now the banks have foreclosed on 14.5 million homes.
That's a solid figure, is it?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that much? That much?
yeah.
That's a lot
That's
of
coming
people.
directly from a forensic examiner who examined the books and testified before Congress.
And that would have been people that otherwise would not have been had the malfeasance not been part of the system.
Right. Had all the politicians had not sold out the American people. As far as I'm concerned, all the politicians that voted for that committed treason.
You voted for the bailout of the banks?
For the bailout of the banks, right. Those politicians committed treason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was an economic war against the United States, and it's put the United States in debt, and 14.5 million families have been put out on the street. That's 14.5 million families homeless because of the bank scam. If the politicians gave $16 trillion to bail out the banks and buy the so-called toxic assets, then the government bought up all those mortgages. So if the government bought all those mortgages, how did the banks still turn around and foreclose on 14.5 million people? They did it all fraudulently.
Fraudulently by securitization and leveraging and so forth?
Right.
Some of those leveraged on the bond market.
Right.
They floated on the bond market, and the rating agencies went along with Moody's and all that.
Right. And what they did was they took, let's say you had a mortgage and I had a mortgage and a couple other people had mortgages. They took our mortgages and they made copies of them, sometimes 10, 20 copies, right? Then they pooled your mortgage, my mortgage, and somebody else's mortgage. They pool it together and it becomes a bond.
Or
then
they floated on the bond market. The bond market is supposed to be very, very secure.
Right. Then they gave them
long-term interest.
Then they gave them AAA rating.
Yeah. That's cooperation with the rating agents supposed to be rating that stuff.
Right.
Or keeping track of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But those, when they made copies of the original notes or the original mortgages, those were fraudulent. Those were forgeries.
Some of those bonds were, or those, as I understand, I don't understand well, but some of them had absolutely nothing in them at all.
Right.
They were just absolutely empty.
And then they sold them on Wall Street to people's retirement funds.
Which is supposed to be, again, very secure.
Right.
And there are, rules for that.
And when the stock market crashed, kind of, and all those people lost their life savings from retirement funds, the banks ripped that off.
Yeah.
Then they called them toxic assets when they should have been called forgeries, and the bankers who created them should have been put in jail. Instead of our politicians saying the bankers made all these forgeries and we're going to arrest them, our politicians said, oh, they're toxic assets and we're going to buy them. And they bought them for 100 pennies on the dollar. And they bought sometimes 10, 15 forgeries for the same mortgage. And they destroyed the original mortgage.
Or maybe lost them even.
Well, in some cases they lost them, but in a lot of cases they destroyed them because the guy who has the original can be blamed for the forgeries. So if nobody has the original, then who made the forgeries?
I see, they can get away with it.
And the banks passed it from this bank to this bank to this bank. They passed them around enough.
And everybody was in on the game, apparently.
Right, all the bankers were in on the game, all the politicians.
Agencies,
right.
And they did it in the name of, if we don't do that, we're too big, and the whole world economic system would collapse into utter chaos.
Right.
That was their argumentation.
Right. It was all a scam, and it was all created by the bankers.
Yeah.
To loot our treasury.
I wonder, could I bring up another thing? Back, like I was born in 35, right, and everything, and you had a Great Depression in 1929.
Right.
They had a build-up like that kind of thing. And Mr. Roosevelt came in with a lot of ideas. He had quite a bit of political support for making change, Social Security and these things that he got done. But he was thought of as being a person who was from the upper class and that, but that he saved capitalism.
Well,
That's what he said. He saved capitalism by taking certain measures, and that's in a sense what they were saying now, that it's another double, 2-generation kind of thing with the one recently, but they've saved the system, and if you didn't have the capitalist system, the world would fall apart. He had to save the...
well, it was the same scam then.
The same stuff, that's what they keep saying each time it collapses.
What they did was they collapsed the economy because the unions were getting big and people were starting to get a decent wage. So they collapsed the economy and they made people starve. People were starving. You're
talking now in the 30s and 40s? Yeah.
Right.
What got us out of it was the Second World War.
Right, but people were starving.
Yeah, it was horrible. Grapes of wrath.
What they did was they said, okay, well, we're going to set up these programs, the WPA programs.
Works Progress Administration.
And what they did was they paid people basically slave laborers because they were starving.
Well, I know some people, they did set up things where they had art projects. Art doesn't usually figure in anything that's really, because that's just... but they did set up some things where poets and things were involved, and there were things done, some make-work things along that line. But he saved it. And so what about the idea that when it came to that thing, what about the argument that the whole political class, we'll say, and the business class, that if they had not done that, remember we were talking before the camera about Mr. Paulson coming in to see Nancy Pelosi, and at that thing where he had 3 pages, September 20, 2008, he came in, 3-page thing that the Congress had to agree to. The Republicans didn't, the Democrats had to. He got down on one knee and said, you got to sign this by Tuesday. It's got to be on the president's desk and signed by Friday, or the whole world will fall apart. What about that argument? Do you think there's anything to it in
what they should have did, see... He was part of the scam. That was, he was in on the scam. And what they should have did was said, the bankers have now committed all this criminal activity. They've created all this fraudulent paperwork. We should jail all the bankers, seize all their assets, and return it to the American people.
Would that have mean setting up what would be let's say in a political dialogue, that would be let's just socialize everything and have a socialist economy. We could have a single-payer health care and all these things.
I'm not saying socialize things, but if the bankers acted in a criminal manner and looted our treasury and took 14.5 million homes and created fraudulent documents in order to do it, then those bankers should have been jailed for their thing.
No, I don't think there's any big-time bankers going in jail yet.
No, none of them
Danny
yet.
Schichter put out that film Plunder, which really addressed all this, a lot of this. Yeah.
And if they'd have put the bankers in jail and seized their assets and returned it to the American people, we still could have had, and then they could have made laws to make the banking system operate legally. Operate in a legal manner, so that the too big to fail, that was just a scam. They got $32 trillion.
Yeah, I know. The money is staggering. And then look at the concentration of the wealth now. It's becoming obscene and unworkable.
Right.
I mean, it's all the tax, it was started with, all the benefits went to the upper. And now is there a shift in the means of production, or some sort of a seismic shift in terms of the human condition that is behind all of the shenanigans that are going on, or not? Or how do we explain the situation where... Could I show a thing, Joe? I saw a thing here the other day. Maybe Melanie, you can bring... This is a thing. It happened, how things just fall out of the wherever you are and everything. This came out, an older magazine. It was actually June 29th of last year. This is a copy of, and if you can come in tight on this focus so that we can see even the small print. It's the March of Protest. And here you got over on the, camera left, it says 1848. That's Karl Marx and all the revolutions in Europe. And then it said there's the Woodstock generation, it's 1968. With Woodstock, and then you got the Soviet protests in Europe. Then you got protests in the Soviet Union. And now, at the present time, it says there's a lady with a cell phone, and it says everywhere.
Yeah.
So this protest is being felt at a level, existential level, is going everywhere now and affecting every institution in a systemic kind of way that is qualitative, not just quantitative. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do we account for the mess that the dysfunction that is characteristic of everything we see on the news practically, or with no explanations of how we're going, what the meaning of it is, what's going on, and are we ever going to have some sort of a qualitative change where we have a system that really does serve everybody, including right, left, and the ecology?
I think it's going to take all the American people to really take a stand. You know, but the American people have to wake up in mass and demand that the criminals that are running the world right now.
America, how about the world population?
I said that are the criminals that are running the
world. You
world.
have to say American, but it is Americans a large hand in that, and they've got institutions they're subscribing to as being good for all time. Too, they haven't got a system that's equal to what the world needs in a qualitative new way. That's what we're getting at. Who does? And the intellectual community is falling down on the job. The intellectuals aren't coming up with some sort of what exactly would we do and who would do it and when would we do it, what would be the timing and why. What's going on is not even there available to us, why there's so much dysfunction.
Well, you know my views. I've said a lot of times about the intellectuals. I don't really have a lot of respect for the intellectuals because if the intellectuals had really taken a stand, a lot of the wars that we've had, if the intellectuals had spoke up, we wouldn't have had the Vietnam War. If the intellectuals had spoke up, we wouldn't have had the Afghan War and Iraq War. You know, but most of the intellectuals, they want grants from the government, so they're not going to make waves, you know.
That's true.
And it's with not just the intellectuals, the scientific community.
Yeah.
You know, they're all afraid, I might lose my grant if I speak up.
Exactly. They got a position that they want to maintain.
Right. Yeah. But it's time for everybody to start speaking up, speaking the truth, you know, until
well, wait a minute, if I may. What is the truth? The truth is a many-splendored thing, and we don't seem to have any comprehensive understanding of what's going on.
No, there are many people. There are many people who know the truth.
Well, who are the people who have the truth?
Right,
there are people who think God gives you the truth or something.
No, let me. There are people in the financial sector who really know the books and know the scam that's gone down. But they got nice fat jobs, cushiony jobs as accountants or whatever. So rather than risk their
position
to be whistleblowers, they're remaining silent. What we need is people who know about political corruption to start speaking up. You know, people who work for these politicians who know that they took a bribe to sell out the American people. Those people need to speak up. We really need all the people in this country to start speaking the truth that they know. If you work for a politician and you know that the banks just paid them off or gave big campaign funds for them to bail out the banks at the expense of the American people, those politicians committed treason. You know?
Well, okay, those are sacred words in a sense, and they go back to, let's say, I guess, the legal system we set up in this country. I mean, I guess what I'm reaching for is something that goes beyond all that, because I don't think there's, I don't know, Joe, I don't know, but I'm interested in everything, right? And I guess we're learning all the time, and so whether it's intellectuals or whatever, but people, poets and so forth, the whole sum of human knowledge and everything. And we're learning, and we know now, and we got this technological capability that's emerging, and there's something new coming. We know now that this universe was created 13.7 billion years ago. We got a picture of the shock wave 200,000 years after because of the telescope. We didn't have the telescope in the 15th century or something, or, you know, we couldn't, you know, there's progress being made along a certain vector, and we're coming to understand things more and more. And history... Joyce, great poet, he had Jedediah say, history is a nightmare, you could add, of injustice. It's always been unjust, the system. But are we talking about having a system that's truly, and what do we mean by justice? What do we mean by, let's say, the haves as opposed to the have-not status for people in the world. What does it mean to be a have? What is our capability? What is the reality? The larger reality in which the whole of the human process is emerging. We're coming to a time of qualitative transformation, not quantitative, not out of history.
Well, right
I mean,
now,
that's intellectualizing, but it's also, and why do we have dysfunction virtually everywhere with these outdated institutions we've inherited out of history?
Because of greed.
Greed, okay,
You know,
well that's another
right now,
thing, like money, greed, okay, yeah.
We're at a place in history where we've never been before.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Where we could, there's no reason for any country to have starving people. Do we have enough? We could produce. We got machines now that can plow fields.
Have you noticed? Yeah.
That can plant fields. You know, where it used to take 200-300 people to plant a field. Now
With
they
hard back-breaking work.
Right now they got a machine that could run through and plant enough food in one day.
Yeah.
Where it took 100 people.
I used to like Muammar Gaddafi, and he said, and his friend Trey, he said Sudan, much less the Midwest of the United States, could feed the whole world.
Yeah.
We got a capability of providing for people that we have not had historically. That's what I'm getting at. And do you think the percentage of the world population that can be seen to be a have, you have to get a definition. What does that mean? But you get a definition. The percentage of the world population that could be seen to be a have as opposed to a have-not through time, that it's increasing, I think you can almost establish that axiomatic. There's a higher percentage of the world population, given the technology and given the capability, that can be realistically seen and be modeled as being a have, to where we reach the point where we may actually be transcending material scarcity as an ontologic reality, which has never held until about the year 1970, according to most of the modeling. Shouldn't that be up on the table of the president and of the intellectuals and so forth? But they're all tunnel visioned out into specialization rather than coming up with systems understanding.
It's not so much that they're tunnel vision. We have an elite group that believe that they see the way the world should be run. Some of them have even come up with, well, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and that's too many people, and we got to cut it down to 6 billion people. That's why right now it's
like Malthus.
You look in the sky. They're putting chemtrails up there. We have more people sick, more people with cancer than ever before, more people with flus, and they're raining all kinds of poisons down on us because they're trying to eliminate the population. The American people, not just the American people, the people of the world have to wake up, you know. The lunatics that run the world, that have all the power and all the money, believe that 6 billion people need to be eliminated. You know.
Well, you got source of that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's Zygmunt Brzezinski talks about it. Oh, there's a whole bunch.
I've done programs.
A lot of the neocons.
Yeah,
you know.
The neocon, Mr. Wolfowitz. I used to go down to Washington in the 70s, and they were there. The neocons were there, and Wolfowitz was there, and that was in the 70s. They had a little porta-pack doing some senator or something, you know. But they were there and known, and they were just considered at that time as the absolute total lunatic bunch.
They are lunatics.
And he was saying then, we got to that's early 70s, we've got to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
They had that set up geopolitically and so forth. But that's a group. That's a political group. If we do you think we'll ever get a system where it can include the far right, the far left, and people in the middle, and the ecology, rather than there being this thing about who's the enemy causing the trouble and the political fighting over virtually 360 degrees of dysfunction with all the outdated institutions we inherited out of history, and be relating to something relevant to an emerging, maybe liberating future for the human society that is truly qualitative transforming?
Well, I think that's only going to happen when the people wake up. The people have to wake up en masse, you know, and put a stop to it. You know, there's more of us than there are of them.
That's for sure. 1%, 99. Yeah, right.
And if the 99% really started becoming active, whatever it is that's your pet peeve, whether it's the smart meters, which are radiating people, or the chemtrails, or the fracking, or we got so much craziness going on, and it's just the rich people, like up in Woodstock where I live.
Yeah.
Fortis of Canada just bought Central Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
And my electric bill used to be every 2 months was $200, but this last bill that I got just jumped up to $435.
Wow, that's 100%.
More than it was 200.
Right.
435.
Yeah.
And what that's going to mean is more and more people in the wintertime, in order to keep their gas and keep their heat or their electric, are going to pay these high bills, and then they're not going to be able to pay their mortgage, which is going to cause more people to lose their homes.
Right.
And this is all being set up, and it's all being manipulated. The price of oil's being manipulated. They took all the jobs. What they did was they got everybody, get a mortgage. Mortgages are cheap. Everybody go out and get a mortgage, and you can have a house, and you can have a house. And all these people had good jobs, and they thought they could, I can afford a 20-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage.
Yeah.
And then when all these people got these mortgages, this was all set up, then they shipped all the jobs out of the country.
Well, you had to get containerization to come along to have that become an effective supply chain and everything. But
look at the
jobs. Technological development is coming along all along.
Look at the jobs. It's like we used to have, I'll use one example. On all the toll booths, we had toll takers.
That's right, friendly
toll takers. They had
takers.
jobs.
Yes, that's right.
Now they went to Easy Pass. Right?
It's automated.
All those people lost their jobs.
Think of all the algorithms that are being written and the robotic. Joe, you notice it's going exponential?
Yeah.
It's going exponential. It's involving us here. It's involving all communications. It's going exponential. And you know what else is going exponential now? Robotization, which is an extension of the information tech. So everything that's being produced is increasingly, it's all a robot doing the production. And that robot can be owned by somebody, but it displaces labor in a way that you want to get the productive capability. It creates great stuff and everything, but they don't have an economic critique or an economic system that's relevant except the old-fashioned left, right, communist, socialist, all this kind of thing, and they don't have a system that relates to the reality that's emerging at an economic level. At a policy, we need that. And we don't have it coming from the political class or the established intellectual class. They're all reified. They're thinking of Keynes, or they're thinking of Schumpeter, or they're thinking of Karl Marx, or they're thinking along those lines. You need something else, but you can relate.
None of those systems work.
We need something that will inform capital and make capital available to be able to be productive of the human, improving the human condition, greater percentage of haves, get a definition, and then also one that can include the ecology. We have to get that, but we'll also not out, maybe some people would say put all of them in jail or something like that, but we do have a private sector, and we don't want to we want to have a private sector, public sector. They have a way of forming capital that will pay for itself out of its future earnings, which is the logic of business finance. If you don't, you have to depend on past savings to put up the collateral to make an investment that's going to pay for itself in 5 to 7 years, throw off dividend income after that to the owner. But the people, the mass of the people, particularly progressive, don't ever talk about, let's get some ownership into the hands of the people so they'll have a source of income the way things are being produced.
I don't know if you know about Walter Berrien.
No, Walter Berry?
Walter Berrien.
No, I don't. Tell me.
Walter Berrien, checked out, he really got into the books of how the government runs, and he found out that the government, for many years, the American people gave money to the government in taxes, and that the government took that money and invested it, right? Mm-hmm. Now those investments, they own the biggest percentage of most of the big corporations is owned by the government, which is a corporation. It's not what we used to think of as a government.
Yeah.
It's actually a big corporation, and that corporation, we financed it not necessarily our generation, but generations from the past, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, built this country to be the wealthiest country in the world. Now, all that money they reinvested. But what they do is they got two sets of books.
They do it double entry bookkeeping.
Right. There's all this huge amount of wealth that the federal government owns, right? But what they do is they say, well, we need to run the government, so we're going to borrow from the Federal Reserve. And then they borrow from the Federal Reserve, and they say, let's say they borrow $1 billion from the Federal Reserve. And then they say, well, now we got to pay that billion back in interest.
And interest, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, but if they only printed $1 billion in paper, they know that you can't give back more than $1 billion. So the interest is going to keep building up. So they run it up into debt, so they can just keep raising our taxes, taking our money, saying, well, the government's in debt, we got to pay this. And every year they run that same scam. Meantime, they got a set of books. You people out there in television land should really look up Walter Berian
and
the Capra account.
It's slow. The last name.
Berian.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's spelled.
Oh.
But
Walter, B-E-R-I-N maybe? Berian? Berian. B-I-R-B-E-R-I-N or something.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay, look it up, yeah.
Google it. And check into what he's saying about the Capra accounts. According to Walter Berian, we have enough money surplus, the government has enough money surplus that they could pay everybody's bills and not have to tax anybody in the United States for the next 1,000 years. That's how much money they have in the one set of books. But the books that they always show the American people is, we borrowed this money from the Federal Reserve, and we're in debt to the Federal Reserve, so we got to tax you and take your salaries.
And your food stamps now.
Right.
They're taking food stamps now.
And everything.
Yeah.
And meantime, there is enough money that every person in the United States could be getting a huge check
for 1,000 years.
For 1,000 years.
That's pretty far into the distance. Yeah, that's pretty far.
So what we need is the American people to wake up, and once the American people really see the scam that's gone down.
Are you talking now the scam in America? Are you talking the last 10 years? Are you talking the last 5,000 years? Or what, a long-term process of...
It's been, every one of the depressions we've had has been set up to scam the American people, to bankrupt them, seize their, every so many years, they bankrupt everything. Then they confiscate people's property, like they build the property value up. Then they drop it, and they make people go bankrupt. And then they take back everybody's houses for pennies on the dollar. And then they start it up again.
It's almost like generational, I think. There's a guy, Robbie Batra, wrote on that. It's generational, 30 years or so. But after the Second War, the tax rate that Mr. Eisenhower, Republican, did, it was 92%. They had to pay back the war stuff and everything. And then after the war in the United States, compared as part of the world, they had a golden time from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I don't know, 90s or something, and for the mass of the people that do not have the capability of having what's called collateral to put up to buy, let's say, a capital asset.
Right.
A capital asset like a factory that's going to be built and everything, that is going, and the thing is, it is going to pay for itself, not out of the past savings. It's limited to those who have past savings. Those are already wealthy, more or less. But it's going to pay for itself in the forward movement of the economy in maybe 5-6 years. After that, it's able to throw off a dividend payment to whoever owns the capital asset.
Right.
And it's limited to those who only have past savings, so you have a concentration of wealth. And the only thing that was really available to most of the working people of the United States and everything was an access that's different. But they were able to get a home. Right. And one of the things about that characteristic, the way that some net worth was built up among the lower middle classes and that kind of thing, was to buy a home. You buy it for $5,000, And steady as a rock, it went up. You could chart it.
Right.
Steady as a rock. 5 years later, that house is worth $10,000. After that, it's worth $20,000. It goes up. It built into the expanding value of the home until it hit the fan in about 19 after Glass-Steagall was let off and everything, and so. But that was the way in which your net worth was grown among some of the masses of the people in the country, and then that fell off the end in 2008.
Well, it didn't fall off the end. It was done by design.
Well, okay, but what kind of policies would we advise to our political class? We don't want to trash the Constitution, trash the Declaration of Independence, the institutions we have. We don't want to trash the United Nations. We don't want to trash the corporations.
Well,
or do we?
I'm not big on the United Nations.
Well, okay.
But
but you understand.
I am big on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights,
right?
And the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm.
Our founding fathers originally tried to set up a republic.
Yeah.
Once it became a democracy, it was steady going downhill.
Well, you had the same kind of thing going on in Rome, in the time of Augustus Caesar and all that. I mean, it's a historic. Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, once it became a democracy, in a democracy, 51% of the people can make the other 49% criminals or outlaws. They can,
Well, they did it with the drug laws.
Right.
In the drug war on drugs. That was a war with a prejudice that can get out of hand, or Mr.
It wasn't a war on drugs. It was a war on people.
Yeah, right. But you can put that with the Mr. Hitler, who got the vengeance built up and everything, and got into like a real fascism.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing. We have a fascist government at this point in time.
You think it is fascist, right?
Well, yes, but it's not called that. They have a nice facade, but you have this ruling elite class who pay all the politicians to do their bidding.
If you understand that legal system as you do as a citizen, not as a bar member or as a lawyer who have certain restrictions of what they can do, you actually can bring, as a tactic, effective legal action to help the interests of the mass of the people. Is that not the case that you've dedicated himself to? And you've learned the law in a way that can be a tactic to help the people against those who are playing a three-card Monte game in terms of what goes on in the courts in order to protect the interests of the rich, right?
Right. Well,
so it's a tactic that should not be thrown out with the bathwater.
The two things that the American people really need to do, one, bring the bankers to justice, and in order to do that, we need to bring our courts back to legal, back to real lawful courts. Legal is another word. Lawful is what we want. Legal, anybody can make a law and call it legal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that law is lawful.
What they need, Joe, if I may, in the name of politics, in the history of the world, is whoever's got the biggest club can conquer and establish political legitimacy by a weapon system that can intimidate others.
Right.
That's been the history of the world.
Right.
Right? We recognize that?
Right.
So that's what they're doing. They're the biggest club or the biggest military capability to enforce and establish their legality.
Right.
By that. That's called realpolitik, and it's probably out of date in an era where you got weapon systems that are now species lethal.
Right. Right.
Huh? So there's an existential new thing that's emerging now.
And it's going to take the American people to wake up en masse. We need all the American people to wake up and bring the criminals, the politicians that have sold out the American people to justice, the bankers who have looted the wealth of our country and created all this, the homeless, they've stolen on Wall Street all the life savings of all those people who worked for 20 years and put their money...
pension funds,
their pension funds. I mean, these guys have done such criminal stuff, and our politicians said they're too big to fail. We're going to buy the toxic assets, instead of saying these guys have created fraudulent paperwork, forgeries, and they should have jailed the bankers and returned all that money to the American people. Like I said in the beginning of the show, for $3 trillion, our politicians could have bailed out every American every person who had a mortgage and paid it off so that that person would own their own home. But instead they gave $32 trillion to the banks. And then the banks foreclosed on 14.5 million families and looted the life savings of all those people who worked for 20 years.
And in all of that, if you understand the law, there are procedures that can bring that into the fore to the benefit of the people if people would only wake up to what legal things are available to us and we educate ourselves to it as a certain position you're taking successfully in a number of cases within the court system. God bless you. You know, that's a tactic that's really worth doing like that. And then this is all a matter of, you know, we're talking about education and that, but then you got media. Media is growing leaps and bounds. You know, we're here in public access, and it's going.
And public access is under attack out in California.
Well, Joe, everything's under attack. Everything is up for grabs in terms of attacking it. No.
Yeah.
Every institution.
Out in California, there is no more public access.
Well, no,
I've talked to a lot of people out there.
Well,
and they say we used to have public access, but we don't have it anymore.
It's been attacked. You know, George Stone. If you go to George Stone, he was a founding father of this. He was a really good guy, and they set it up back. You got a magic year about 1970. Everything was happening around 1970. That was the time not only of sex, drugs, and rock and roll and everything, Woodstock, but you know, there was something existentially new happening in the human condition.
But so a mini renaissance.
I remember
it really was.
I remember. Well, it was more than a renaissance. Yeah, it was like a qualitative thing being picked up in the air that there was something major going on. Like I would go to the fact we may be coming to the end of 200,000 years of human species evolution in terms of our relationship to the material reality. We may have crossed the line where there were more haves and have-nots at the level of capability, transcending scarcity as an ontologic reality, a liberating possibility and everything. But then you got the media things coming, and now I remember Bruce Springsteen. I really like Bruce Springsteen.
Me too.
Yeah. You know a lot of the rock people. I know that from way back. We could have gotten into that. You were very helpful in getting the 70 and other Woodstock festivals. Thank you for all of that. But he had to say, my baby and I got a house, a bourgeois house, and we settled down. We got television. There were 57 channels and nothing on.
Right.
Now we got 1,998 channels, and one could add, if you wanted to, there's very little on in terms of all that. It's all chasing a buck. It's economic malfunction. They don't have an economic system that relates to the future writ large. And now it's going to be doubled. In exponential is exponential. It's not 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 10, 100, 1,000. You know, and it's not going to stop. And it's going into robotics. And so we're stuck with a labor theory of value where everybody's going to get money by having a job. They're being displaced by technology. They can produce an overwhelming amount. They got no way to distribute demand to them through ownership of a technology piece. The left is all caught up in the surplus labor theory of value and that sort of thing. They got outdated things coming out of history, but then the media is another thing. We got 1,998 channels now. Well, and they're going to bring, here at M&N, they're going to be 5, they're in the process of starting up 5 more. That's causing a lot of angst about what in the world is going on in the media as within everything else.
The media right now is controlled by the same few people that are running the world. And it's set up, you know, you got 50,000 people going to a Super Bowl, right? And that 50,000 people should be going to Washington and demanding that the politicians do something.
What would they demand specifically? What is to be demanded?
Well,
that's what I think is kind of opaque.
First off,
what to demand?
First off, the two biggest things that I see that this country needs. First, we got to get our courts back to where there's real due process. You know,
that's a huge task, is it not? Given the shenanigans.
And then the second thing is, if we had honest courts, then we could bring the bankers and the people who've scammed all that wealth to justice.
Yeah.
And the politicians that have sold out the American people, we could bring them to justice. And once the people have honest courts, that's the most important thing right now. For
honest courts.
Honest courts. Right now, you go into landlord-tenant court, and they're all the judges were put in by the big people, the big owners of the co-ops and real estate people.
Real estate's a big interest.
So when you go into landlord-tenant court, right away that judge puts the person who they're trying to take their home. The judge puts them on the defensive.
Yeah, you got that thing about you say, do you understand what you're saying? You stand under.
Right.
And all your rights are
Well, that's in criminal.
That's only criminal. Okay,
criminal
yeah.
cases. But right now, anybody going into landlord-tenant court, the judges are in the pockets of the big financial people.
And what that's about is money.
Right.
We got back at the beginning of this, it's money. It's
Right.
economics.
Right.
We don't have an economic system that lets us do what we're capable of doing collectively that could include people all on the far right and the far left and in the middle and the ecology, which is maybe available to us in a way it never has been. So we need vision from the intellectuals, comprehensivists, people like Fuller
Right.
and people like that who are thinking comprehensive.
Not just vision,
and we're
we
not
need-
falling
we
down.
need-
They're not presenting an alternative.
Not just vision, we need them to take a stand.
Well, a stand
You know?
for what?
Well, whatever it is, if a scientist, let's just say, for example, a scientist knows that which we've heard from a few scientists who know about DNA,
Yeah, okay.
right? And they know that DNA is not accurate.
Well, you have to spell out what you mean by that.
We have people sitting in jail where DNA evidence convicted them. And then a couple DNA scientists who won't, we've talked to them, they won't come out publicly and say it,
Yeah.
but they've told us that it's a big secret among the DNA people that DNA is not accurate.
Well, that would have
The
to
only
be...
people, let me finish,
Okay, yeah, sure, by all means, yeah.
the only people that know that are the real scientists who do DNA research, and the poor guy sitting in jail who went to jail for a DNA sample and he knows he didn't commit the crime. That guy who's sitting in jail knows the DNA is full of shit.
Sometimes it works the other way, doesn't it? I mean, on all the television programs, it does. The most popular television program is that naval thing now. The naval, what do you call it? DNA. It's forensic thing. It's the most popular program by far of all the thousands of programs that there are. We're heading for 5 billion television channels when people can make a channel on their cell phone, high definition yet and everything.
Yeah.
But the DNA has also gotten people. And I mean, are we going to?
I was just using that as an example.
Yeah, I know, but that's a rumor. That's a rumor by people. You have to set it up. And is that the case? And what do we mean by that? Because Watson and Crick holds, it seems to me, DNA, they think there may be some people who think that or something, but that's something that has to be presented, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it's not
I'll use another
fact.
example.
Yeah.
We got scientists that know what's in these chemtrails that they're spraying all over the place, right? But those scientists are afraid to speak out because they're worried about their job and their
money.
their position.
Back to money. You
Right.
can't go wrong if you try to run down the money.
Right.
The money issue.
Right.
And then that gets to economic theory, and economics and politics are joined at the hip.
No, but
so we don't have the leadership nationally or internationally that's future oriented.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we need, and we don't. It is intellectual, a failure of intellectual. They're all reified. That's reestablished institutions out of the past. Ours are from 1776. It's outdated. We're going past that period. It's a new thing. We're coming into a new whole relationship. Maybe coming to the end of what's 200,000 years of human existence. We may have a real liberating order, the jump up time at the end of time. We may be coming up to a time where there would be every human being realizing its full potential in the greatest cooperation with others, like a jam session, a gigantic human-wide, ecologically wide jam session that will give us a resonancy and accommodate us to a level transcendent to what we've been for 200,000 years as a species.
Yeah.
Evolution works that way.
Yeah.
And we don't have that kind of visionary leadership because it's so inconvenient to all the vested interests of the outdated institutions, which are legion and virtually relative to every institution that we've inherited.
And it's inevitable that all these institutions are going to collapse.
Well, let's hope not.
Well,
I mean, we're going to have to...
No, I hope they do.
No, see, think about it, man. Are you sure?
Out of the ashes of the evil empire, maybe we'll get something good.
Yeah, but you're putting it out on a dialectic where there's evil, good, and bad, and that's something. It's
Well,
just
there
gross
is evil.
ignorance.
There is
We've
evil.
all been ignorant.
No, almost all the wars we've had
Yeah.
in our lifetime, especially.
It's just a history of wars all back through history.
Yeah, but yeah,
the club.
and it's always about plunder.
It's about plunder. It's back to money.
Right.
Okay. Oh, it's now in the modern era.
Right.
Yeah.
But
so you need an economic policy that is not grounded on Keynes or Schumpeter or Marx or any of the traditional
Right.
thing. You need something new that involves ownership. From the left, they shouldn't say ownership's evil. They say the private sector's evil. Let's socialize everything. The socialists say, and the capitalists say, let's get rid of this taxing. Let's get rid of the government. They're still arguing the same old thing rather than getting at something that can be inclusive of the whole.
Well, for me,
in my humble opinion.
I think capitalism was a good idea, except they should have said at a certain point, like let's say they said at $10 million you got to retire. You can't have more than $10 million.
Well, look, at a certain point, if you have a mindset and you're at 10, how many, if you sit down, we had dinner the other night, right? You sit down, there's a porterhouse steak, it's really good, but you can't eat 3 or 4 or 5 of them. There is some limit to what and beyond that, if you have that, you're not worried about getting a diamond swimming pool full of well-cut diamonds before you're secure. It's insecurity because they don't have a system that lets the human liberation come down on this planet.
Yeah, if they had put a limit on capitalism, they have a limit on the poor.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well,
when you ain't got no money,
right.
you're poor.
That's right.
And that's easy.
And it's like
they should have put a limit on when you get $10 million, you get your gold watch, your pat on the back, and you retire.
Right.
And you can't make no more.
Well,
then there would have been enough to go around for everybody.
Well, I think that the amount that's being available to us is growing exponentially. I think we've actually transcended not the reality. The reality encompasses, and it's always been a few people run everything, whether it's Rome or the kings of England or the bankers today. A few people run everything, everyone else wallowing around in the mud.
Right.
That's been the reality in which humanism. Now we got to get past that.
Right.
And we can, and we have the capability of doing it. And remember, the weapons are species lethal on the club side now. That's an existential new reality. The other side is we have the ability to liberate the human society, everybody, not just some. One of the problems in television is the tyranny of time. We've run out of time. So, thank you for coming in. Great talking to you. Your pleasure to have a real fighter for us. Always good to be with you, Joe. Always good. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. A real supporter and the use of the real understanding effectively to help the people of the law and how to tactically use it. Joe Barton, and also an advocate for the criminal treatment of our cannabis members of the society. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. That's it for now. Thanks again, Joe, for all the good work.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Goodbye, television.
Oh, wait. Let it.